Hi folks, the purpose of this first video is to give you a general overview of how to access and use SPSS, which is the computer program that we'll be using quite a bit in this class. The reason why we're going to use this program so much is to minimize the amount of math that we have to do. So while it might be a little tricky to learn at first, it'll certainly be worth it in the long run. For anyone who's used Microsoft Excel before, you'll see that SPSS is actually quite similar, and I don't anticipate it'll be terribly difficult for those of you to learn, even if you haven't used Microsoft Excel before. First off, how are we going to get access to the SPSS program? Ideally, we would want SPSS to be three things. First, we want it to be convenient, meaning we can use it whenever we want, wherever we want, ideally from our home computer. Second, we want it to be reliable, meaning we don't want it to freeze or crash or, do other things that might make us angry. And third, we want it to be free. We don't want to have to pay for it. Now, the bad news is we cannot have all three of these things. However, we can have any two of these three things that we want, depending on what's most important to us. So if this were a normal semester, I would tell you you can use SPSS at any on-campus computer, either in the CLA building or in the library. Now, the CLA building isn't currently open, so that's not an option. However, I understand that the library actually is open at limited capacity, so if you are wanting to use SPSS on campus, be aware that that is an option, that you can use it in the library. It will be reliable, meaning it will work correctly, and it will be free. You won't have to pay for it. However, it won't be convenient in the sense that you'll have to go to campus to actually use the program. What I encourage you all to do strongly instead is to purchase the SPSS Base Grad Pack. So essentially what you're doing is you're buying a 6-month license of this program to use for yourself that you can install on your own personal computer in the same way that you would install any other program like iTunes or whatever it might be on your own computer. On the first page of our syllabus, you'll see a link on ibm.com that will take you to a website with a list of different vendors that sell this software. One of them I think is called studentdiscounts.com, for example. Another one is called onthehub.com. As far as I know, these are all equally good websites for purchasing SPSS. I believe that the cost is the same. It should be $40 for a 6-month license. Two other things to note. First, you want to buy the base grad pack. There are more sophisticated versions of SPSS that can do more stuff and consequently cost more money. You just want the basic one, the base grad pack, which will also be the cheapest. Secondly, there are also different versions of SPSS. I believe it's now on version 27. Again, I believe they're all the same cost, and I believe they pretty much all work the same way, at least for our purposes. So the exact version that you get doesn't matter. I would get the latest version, assuming it's the same price as the others, which again, I believe is version 27. Usually I would assign a textbook for this class, but for a number of reasons, I've decided not to. And one of the reasons you don't have a textbook is because I would rather you spend that money on buying the SPSS program. So sometime in the next week or so, if you can purchase that program, install it on your computer, I think you'll find it pretty straightforward. I will forewarn you that if you have any trouble installing the program, I may not be able to help very much because I've never had to do it myself. So what I will probably do is refer you to the help desk of whatever website you bought it on. But again, I've had many students buy this program in the past, and there have been very few issues. So sometime in the next week, go ahead and buy this program, install it on your computer so that we can start using it during class. The third option, and I feel obligated to say this just to be thorough, there is a way to access SPSS for free using your Towson Net ID, in other words, your email address, through something called the virtual workspace. Now, you'll notice that it's free and it's convenient, but it's not reliable. In my experience, it freezes a lot, it crashes a lot, it's needlessly confusing, and even when it does work, it's very slow and frustrating. So while that is technically an option, I discourage you from using the virtual workspace. You will have a much easier time following along and doing your assignments if you just purchase the software yourself, or in some situations you may want to go to the library if it's convenient, but under no circumstances will you have to go to campus, of course, if you don't want to. Okay, what does the program actually look like? When you open SPSS, you'll see that, again, it looks kind of like Microsoft Excel in the sense that it's a big grid or spreadsheet type format. The first thing I want you to notice is at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, there are two major types of views in SPSS. There's what's called variable view, and there's what's called data view. So what we're going to do in the rest of this video is we're just going to go through each of those options, variable view and data view, and we'll take a closer look at exactly what kind of information we can find in each place. Now, all of the SPSS files that we're going to work with all semester are already posted on the course website. If you click on the left-hand side where it says SPSS data files, anytime you need a file for a homework or an exam or for the examples that we do in class, they will all be available on that website. All you have to do is click it and it should open, or you may need to download it and then open it from wherever you downloaded it from. If you look in the top left-hand corner here, you'll see that this particular data file that I'm showing you is called 212survey-f19.sav. What this actually contains is the data from the survey that you all filled out, the Google Form survey, from a class that I taught, the same class in the fall 2019 semester. So same questions, but answered by different students. As soon as I can, I will get your survey answers uploaded to the website so that in future classes and videos we can play around with the data from you all. Also notice that every SPSS file is going to end with .sav. So, in the same way that a PDF ends in .pdf or a Word document ends in .doc, anytime you see .sav, that means that it's an SPSS data file. So again, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you should see two options, data view and variable view. What you're seeing here is the top bit of what you'd see under variable view if you were to open this particular data file. In a nutshell, variable view shows us every variable that we have measured in our sample. In our case, it shows us every question that you all answered when completing the survey. So the first question was about your age, the second question asked for your sex, the third question asked for your class year, the fourth question asked for whether you live on or off campus, the fifth question asked for your height, the sixth question asked if you own a pet, yes or no, and so on and so on and so on. The variable view that you'll see in the actual data file is, contains more questions than the one that you see on the screen here. So every row in variable view is going to be a different variable or question that we asked of our participants. If we were creating this file from scratch, the first thing that we would need to do is give each variable a name. Now, we want the names to be short, but we also want them to be as descriptive as possible. So I would say, generally you want to keep them 10 letters or shorter, but to the extent possible, you also want to make the name clearly indicate what that question asked or what that variable is measuring. In some cases, this will be very easy, right? With something like age, you can just write age and everybody will know what that means. Or sex, you can just write sex and everybody will know what that means. In other situations, it might be a little more difficult, which we'll talk about in just a second. Another thing to know about variable names is that, as you can see on the screen, none of them have spaces in them. SPSS will not allow you to put a space in a variable name. What you can do, if you would like, is use an underscore symbol instead of a space. But if you try to put a space in a variable name, SPSS will yell at you. Now, in many cases, the variable or the survey question will be obvious from the variable name itself: age, sex, height, and so on. In other cases, it might be less obvious. Let's take the variable housing, for example. Now, if all we knew about that variable was that it was called housing, that wouldn't really tell us a whole lot about what it is, right? Is it, do you own your own house? Is it, where do you live? Is it, what kind of house do you live in? That one word housing could mean lots of different things. So if we find ourselves in a situation where the variable needs a little more explanation, something longer than we can do just with the name, what we can do is we can add a label. In the label column, what we're essentially doing is we're writing out the operational definition of the variable. This is like just making a note to ourselves to remind ourselves what that variable is measuring. So this variable housing, for example, this variable housing, for example, we can specify under label that the variable housing refers to the question, do you live on or off campus? So a person's answer to that question will be what we're calling the housing variable here. Okay, so we've given each variable a name, and if necessary, we've elaborated on that under the label column. Another example of this would be for height. If we want to specify that we measured height in inches, that's something we can indicate under the label column. The next thing we want to do, we want to tell SPSS for each of these variables, what kind of variable is it? Now, you'll remember from last week, we talked about 4 different kinds of variables. We have categorical and continuous, and then within each of those, we have a few subtypes. So categorical variables can be either nominal or ordinal, and then continuous variables have 2 subtypes as well. All the way on the right side of the screen, where it says measure, for each variable we can go through, and if we click on it, we'll get a drop-down menu with 3 options, either nominal, ordinal, or scale. So for each of these variables, we should indicate what kind of variable it is. If it's nominal or ordinal, or if it's continuous, in which case we'll select scale. We don't have to draw, there's no option for interval or ratio, it's just continuous, is sort of a catch-all term there. So age, for example, is a scale variable, right? It's your age in years, so it's a number, it's continuous, so we would indicate that as a scale variable. Sex is nominal. We have multiple categories, but there's no obvious ranking to them. So for sex, we would indicate that that's a nominal variable. For class year, freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, that is an ordinal variable. We're putting people into categories, but they have a clear ordering to them. So under measure for class year, we would put ordinal, and so on for all the rest of our variables. Now there's one last step that we have to do in variable view, and we only have to do this final step for variables that are categorical. So if a variable is continuous, something like age or height or something like that, the person's score is going to be a number. So their answer to that question is also going to be a number. You know, I am 22 years old, or I am 80 inches tall, or whatever it might be. For categorical variables, however, their answer to that question is going to be a word or a label. But SPSS is a computer program, and computer programs don't work with words, they work with numbers. So for each categorical variable in our file, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go through and assign a numerical value to every category. In other words, let's take sex for example. We have 2 groups there. We have male and female. We have to designate a number that's going to indicate that a person answered male to the sex question, and we have to designate a different number to indicate that the person answered female to the sex question. Now, it doesn't matter what numbers you use. It makes no difference. I typically use 1 to indicate male and 2 to indicate female. I only do that because I find it easy to remember, because the word male has 1 syllable and the word female has 2 syllables. With something like class year, we might make freshman equal to 1, sophomore equal to 2, junior equal to 3, and senior equal to 4. But it really doesn't matter what numbers we assign to these different categories. We could just as easily make 1 female and 2 male. We could make male 0 and female 1. We could make male 13 and female 67. It really makes no difference as long as we know which numbers we've chosen to designate to correspond to which categories. And where we're going to see that information is under where it says values. So notice for our 2 continuous variables, age and height, we don't have any values because we don't need them, right? If your height is 80, it means you're 80 inches tall. But for our categorical variables, we have a number assigned to every category. And if you click on any one of these boxes, a pop-up window will appear to show you which numbers correspond to which categories. So for example, if I were to click right here, a window would pop up that says, yeah, 1 is equal to male and 2 is equal to female. Usually for yes/no questions, no is a 0 and yes is a 1. So for do you own a pet, anyone who doesn't own a pet would get a score of 0 for that variable, and anyone who does own a pet would get a score of 1 for that variable. We'll see on the next screen why that becomes important. So to summarize variable view, we get there by clicking the tab at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. What it shows us is a list of all of our variables, a description under label of what they're measuring, what type of variable they are under measure, and for categorical variables, it tells us which number corresponds to which category. The other tab at the bottom left hand of the screen is called Data View. Now, this is where we actually see the data, or in this case, we actually see people's answers to the survey that we had them fill out. Now, you'll notice that every variable that we saw on the variable view screen now has its own column. So we have a column for age, a column for sex, a column for class year, and so on. And next to that variable name, we have a little symbol that tells us what kind of variable it is. So the little ruler next to age tells us that age is a continuous variable. The 3 little circles next to sex tells us it's a nominal variable. The little bars next to class year tell us it's an ordinal variable, and so on. If you switch to data view and your screen does not look exactly like this one, here's one thing you should try to make it look like this. At the top, under View, if you click on View, you will see an option that says View Value Labels. You want to make sure that the box next to View Value Labels is checked off. What that will do is it will replace, for the categorical variables, it will replace the number with the name of the category that corresponds to that number. So for example, if you're looking at the sex column here, and all you're seeing is 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, all the way down, what that's saying is each of these people has a score of 2 for sex. Now, rather than having to remember that 2 means female, if you turn on the value labels option, it will just show you female. Now, in data view, every row from left to right contains all of the answers from a given individual person. So for example, person number 5, all of their answers to the survey are highlighted in pink right now. So this person is a 19-year-old woman who is a sophomore, who lives on campus, is 62 inches tall, does not own a pet, has brown eyes, exercises 4 days a week, and so on. So any information that falls in the same row all pertains to the same person. Each variable gets its own column, as I mentioned before, with its name at the top and a little symbol that tells us what kind of variable it is. If you were to right-click on the name of the variable, you can sort those data. You can either sort them ascending, meaning smallest to largest, or descending, meaning largest to smallest. So for example, if I wanted to find out how tall is the tallest person in the class, I could right-click on where it says height. I would sort the data, either from largest to smallest or smallest to largest, and that would make it very easy for me to find the shortest person and the tallest person in the class. Another thing we could do, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next video, is we could ask SPSS to give us what's called a frequency table, where if we right-click on the name of the variable and we select descriptive statistics, it will show us a table that tells us how many people have each score or how many people fall into each category. So for example, if I right-clicked on class year and I selected descriptive statistics, a table would pop up that would tell me how many people in our class are freshmen, how many people in our class are sophomores, how many people in our class are juniors, and so on, so that we don't have to actually go through and count. SPSS will do the counting for us. That's it for this video. In the next one, we will talk more about frequency graphs and tables. I encourage you to play around a bit with SPSS using the survey data on our website, and let me know if you have any questions.